Okay, now we got some audio going. Sorry about that if you're online. Did I make a clicker back there? I was going to say send Addison. Okay, let's start again. Now that we got some audio going, everybody's got some audio. Thank you. All right, so like I said, we were talking about the fact that we had no live streaming last week of chapter 12, and we had a great class. I really enjoyed it. I think we really got some good stuff discussed. And so I'm going to kind of we need to touch on 12 so that we have this idea, the video recording in our library online, so that if somebody is studying 2 Samuel, you'll be able to wrap it up. But okay, so last week we look at this whole situation in the context of where we're at. We're at a point where chapter 11, going back to chapter 11, where David stayed home while the military went out into continue a battle with Amnon. And Amnon, because of the insult to the king and everything, and you can go through and look at that in that lesson. But the fact that David stayed home, and in that, he then ends up getting himself into committing adultery with Bathsheba. Bathsheba becomes pregnant. He tries to cover it up and then tries to entice Uriah to go home and to kind of continue the conspiracy of covering up that sin. Doesn't work. He ends up basically murdering Uriah by having Joab place him in the worst place of battle, in which he would be almost guaranteed to be killed. And that was chapter 11 in a nutshell, real quick. 11. And then 12, then we find where he is then confronted by Nathan the prophet. And he comes and he brings his parable and he talks to him and delivers his parable to him. And in that parable, we see he declares his anger about this man who would have taken advantage of somebody who had so less means, where this rich man who had this abundance of animals and sheep and everything refused to take from his own flock and sacrifice and feed, or not sacrifice, but to slaughter and feed his friend that was visiting. But yet he took it from this one who had this, and took the lamb of this one man who had this lamb in a relationship that was a family, a part of their family. And it angered David. And God indicts him and says, "You are the man. You're the one who did this." And then he confesses. God forgives him, but the consequences is something that he then pronounces on him. That the sword by which, he said, the sword of the Amorites that you used to kill Uriah by, the sword will remain in your house. Basically, that there would continue this type of violence that's going to be in his house. And that's what's instrumental into coming into our lesson for tonight, would be there. And the very first thing that happens in that consequence was the child would die that was conceived by him in that adulterous affair that they had. Well, when the child becomes ill, he doesn't just strike him dead. The child becomes ill, and David then prays, grieves, to try to save the child, and petitions God and fasts to the point where his own servants are worrying about him. And they finally, they break the news to him. The child is dead, and he gets up and he eats, refreshes himself, and gets up, and they're kind of shocked, right? I mean, that is kind of shocking. Usually you see that if you have somebody you love that is dying, and you're mourning and praying and petitioning emotionally, when they die, usually the grieving keeps going. It's kind of a weird thing. David realizes, though, logically, one, the child's gone. The judgment of God is sealed. And now I have to get over it. One little thing that we didn't talk about last week was the idea of, he says, I can't be with him, but I will go to him. I don't know if anyone's ever picked up on that, but that is very talking about life after death. The fact that he knew that there was eternal life. That David is almost reflecting and saying, I can't be with him, but I will go to him. The son that died, it's like, which talks about a baby, right? A young baby that dies. Where are they? You see? They don't just go off. They're a whole soul to God. Their spirit. There's something that's still human, and that even though that's a baby, he said that. Now, that may be reaching a little, but there's some that have brought that point up, and it is interesting. Maybe he meant, in the sense of Hebrewic, that I will die too someday. I don't know. But some scholars have said that's kind of inferring this idea of, that the child has gone on to the Lord, and that someday David's saying, I will go to him. I can't be with him now. I think that's probably the spiritual message that's there. Then we see right after that, Solomon's born. Now, we're not going to hear from Solomon for a while because he's a baby. He's got a lot of... David, by this time, has a lot of children that we're going to see. Some of those key points, let's skip over that. The consequences that I want to focus here on is that the sword shall never depart from your house. There's always going to be a turmoil. The consequences of sin has brought so much turmoil in people's homes, and the consequences, not that it can be forgiven, but a lot of times even Christians who have lived lives in the past that has caused different repercussions, they will live with them the rest of their lives. It doesn't mean they're bad people. That's what happens sometimes, and that the consequences of our sins are something that we will suffer through the rest of our lives. Somebody who abuse their bodies through different drugs or certain things, and they're in a crippled status, that they're never going to be healed per se, but it doesn't mean they're a bad person anymore. But the consequences. Somebody who was a drunk and driving and crashed and lost their legs, right? They can be forgiven of anything spiritually, but they're not going to necessarily get their legs back. Their life will always be impacted by it. The one thing about this is that the private sin becomes very public, right? And this sword by which he used to kill Uriah, the violence, and I love the way he actually even brings out the fact that, by the hand of an Amorite, you couldn't even do it yourself. It's like, if you're king, why are you having a Hebrew killed by, Gentiles? This story is going to come back tonight as we see it grow out of this judgment that comes on there. So the passage tonight, chapter 13, we're going to see this desire that Amnon has for his sister, Tamar. Her pleading is something that's very important. That section right there, her statement is so powerful in what she does. And then the way Tamar is desolate, and it becomes devastated by this, and we see David in that not acting. And then Absalom killing Amnon, the brother of Tamar, right? And then Absalom fleeing, running away, and going into exile for 3 years. I think the key verse here is verse 14. He would not listen to her. And being stronger than she, he violated her and laid with her. So the key characters we have here. We have Absalom. He's David's son. And he is David's son by Ahinoam, who is a Jezreelite. Now, she is one of his very first wives. And so his child by her is the oldest, Amnon. And then Amnon, of course. And then we've got another guy that we're going to run across, that Jonadab, who is a key character in this story. We see, that initial response, we see, and one thing I want to bring up as we're reading, so I don't forget. How many times we hear that it's stated David's son, sister, brother, constantly. And bringing up the fact this is his house. You see, not only that, but this is family, right? And so you see that, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom, sister, which was also, what is that? That's my sister. So, but it's so complex, the family structure.
And I think it's if I know it was the devil that was making him yearn for his sister like that, but she even said in verse 13, she said, "As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now therefore, speak to the king, and he will not withhold me from you." So there was a legal way they could have been together, being married, I guess, back then, but he didn't even want to do it that way. He just had to violate her against her will. But,
So if we look at the structure of the family, who do we have? We have the mother of Amnon, who is Ahinoam, and she is a Hebrew. Okay? We have Absalom, who his mother, Narca, but she is a Gentile of a king, a princely, but you have the crown prince, who is Amnon. And so you have this family dynamic that is pitted against each other, that is in conflict, larger, the jeopardy that is coming out through this horrible event, that Amnon is the next king. That should say something, So how is he treated? Well, look at the crown princes. If you look around, crown princes were treated like the king. They had power, wealth, prestige, everything. And the fact that, now think about the lineage, the lineage should be passed, if we're going all the way to Abraham, should go through the Hebrew. And so there's this part where Amnon should be the man. He's the guy who should be trusted to come up, rise up, and then serve. But he ends up being the most scoundrelous guy there is. And then, so this shows as well the multiplicity, the polygamy that is going on here has created with these wives and different lineage and everything about them. We're almost a subculture, a community divided, because each of them have their own homes, they have their own relationships, and I was thinking about this. I have one son that was born in El Paso, and we always would call him the Texan. He wasn't a New Mexican, he was a Texan, because he was born there. And I remember growing up, and my sister and brother, my older brother, I think they were born in California, and we used to call them prune pickers, because that's what a person that was just like that. Well, New Mexico, you're a cotton picker, because you're born in cotton. You were born in New Mexico, or chili picker, and sometimes that would come up. It was like, well, where were you born? And it was joking and funny, kind of. And I'd always, joke around because of the teasing between New Mexico and Texas, that Texas is its own country. And then, of course, we're Mexico, right? We're just the new one. How many people? So it's kind of, but even that. So now take that to the next level, where we have the intensity of this royal family of David, but yet they're not united. They're still very individual. If you look at Absalom and Tamar, who are their grandparents? They're not Hebrew. So there's this loyalty and this connection more towards this Gentile lineage that they're going to have, that the other ones don't have. And then even the mothers. Can you imagine the rivalry? Go back to Sarah and Abraham and all the different Rahab, the different complexities and problems that they had, the wives, and come on, mamas, you tend to kind of, develop our children to have loyalty to us and not to others. And so there's this jealousy between the wives. Well, what do you think that then went down to? It's just this subculture of division. I don't know. We have no historical evidence on how bad. Thanks, Curtis. Curtis just texted me and said, "Good job, IT." Yeah, we got to have somebody back there fixing this stuff. And so we have this subculture of division within the house without this going on. It's just kind of brewing there, this loyalties to each mama of David's wives. But we see that the character of Amnon, immediately, he's looking at his sister. And that's why I said, as you read through this, you constantly are just seeing the familial relationships. Son, sister, brother. When you hear their names, trying to bring this out. He was so tormented, he made himself ill. Just really? Puppy dog love? You know what I mean? That it reminds me when I was young, and I thought I was in love when I was in high school and stuff, and you get a girlfriend and, you're tormented. You can't spend any time apart from them. And that was back in the day when we had no cell phones. The only time you got to see your girlfriend is if you got home, and maybe if you could get on the phone because my siblings were on the phone or we weren't supposed to be on the phone, or I had to wait till I got to high school. I went to school the next day, right? And man, that was forever. And then how many of those? So it's that initial. I always say that. My mom told me this. She asked me when I got married, she goes, "Well, did you love her?" And I said, "Well, of course I love her." She goes, It's a different type of love. She just kind of, she wasn't trying to take it away, but the point was, and then she brought it out. Love is good times and bad times and the memories you create over years. That's where love comes out. It's it's different. And even this love we can see is selfish. Everything about it. And he wanted Tamar at all costs. So he doesn't, and it's not about rightness. He knows better. And if he doesn't, then the head of the household, the head of the family there, who? David? Because the first thing is, it is against Mosaic law, incest. Brothers were not to marry sisters or brothers. Now, we'll talk more about what you're bringing up as we go along, because that is something that she does bring up. But the fact is, he knew that it's wrong. But then this Jonadab, who I just think is fascinating, the way that Jonadab comes in, and it says, and Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. So who is this? This is a cousin. This is a cousin. This is David's nephew. But look what he's described as. Now, the ESV, and I think that from what I can read and understand of even the original language of manuscripts, some say, he was wise. He's not wise. And I like the way the ESV says, very crafty man. There's a difference between wise and crafty. Because he should know better. You're helping your cousin carry something off with deception. Something you know as well as wrong. So what was that? So his little plot was what? He goes, you know what? Lie down on your bed and pretend to be sick. And then when your father, who? David, right? When your dad comes to visit, then you tell him, oh, pretend to be sick, and then let my sister come and take care of me. Now, this is a large family. Why Tamar? You have servants. You're the crown prince. Why Tamar? So David unknowingly becomes a conspirator in this. I mean, he's going to basically, David unknowingly becomes a part of allowing this plot to go forward. And why does he say he needs the king to say, daughter, go take care of your brother? Why can't he just ask Tamar? Because Tamar probably wouldn't do it. Why wouldn't she? You know, I mean, why would you have to go and wait to get the king to come and use the king? That just shows you something as well about that subculture of the families and the cliquishness that was going on between, the different children, sibling relationships that they had. And Absalom, he is living in his own house and dwelling. Amnon is probably living in the palace or close near because he's the crown prince. He has servants. He has all, like I said, second to David, he is getting the next royal treatment. So why is he doing this? There's got to be something.
I mean, even though you just said when I was reading it, that crossed my mind too. I'm like, why are you doing David to go tell his own daughter to go into her own brother? Like, I was kind of like, yeah, I was in the same sense of like, why did he do it that way? Because they had servants and you had other people that could have served and cooked some food right towards your sister at your bedside.
And how silly to drag the king in on it. Think about it. If David was doing his job, when all this comes back around, he should bring justice. And he would know, you used me. You used me to get your sister over here so you could violate her. So there's just a lot that you can read between the lines here but Jonadab is a guy who is crafty, right? His cousin. It's interesting, he doesn't call him cousin, he says his friend.
Yeah.
But we know we just got the genealogy, and we know that he's a cousin that is doing this. So he sets up that elaborate. So he does that, he lays down, and the king, David, he comes, and he requests, please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. Oh, how pathetic. I'm sorry. That is so sappy. Maybe it's me. It's not like, I don't know, her presence, maybe because I know how ugly this story is, I've already prejudiced everything about it, that is sickening to me, that now when I go back and I read this, I'm just like, that is so horrible. Come on. Oh, get my sister to go come here so I can see her not make it at home, and bring me something, like we'll take soup over to somebody's house. You don't come to my house and make soup in my kitchens, or like whenever, Michelle doesn't do that. You don't bring the chicken to my house because I need food and cook it in my house, and then, so I can see Michelle cook my food. I'm sick. I'm dying. The last thing, if I'm getting vomiting and nauseous and stuff, you know what? I want to just rest. I don't know. David doesn't seem to see through it either. If I was David, I'd be going, you don't need your sister. There's a lot of people who could come and take care of you. But I want to understand this counsel, it may be clever, but don't confuse it for any wisdom. It's not. And so she comes over, right? She comes over because David sent home to Tamar saying, go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So she's going to do it. She's going to do it. So she does it. And while she's preparing it and all of this and bakes it, and we read where empties out it before. He's watching her. He's building up more and more lust. You know, in the military, we had these things like in drill and ceremony called preparatory commands. You remember them? And that meant, the preparatory meant get ready. And then the command, you execute. And a real simple one was up 10, and that meant get ready. Huh! And then you execute. Left, there's a preparatory command. Face, and then you turn. I try to explain to teenagers a lot of times. Lust is a preparatory command to do something because your body biologically is stimulated. And it's preparatory commands to get you ready to do something.
Well, this is not when you said the attention, you said the wrong preparatory command for attention. Because you have to, whatever you're in front of, either a squad or a company or a platoon, you know, say platoon.
Right.
That's a preparatory command.
You address.
Yeah, attention.
Yeah. And to me, his preparatory is he's watching her. And he's building up even more lust that he's going to execute upon. You know, he is. And so she comes in, she's going to feed him, and then he says, come here, lie with me. Basically, come here and let's fool around. And this is where Tamar, even of all the characters in this story, she has the most clear spiritual thinking of them all. Even his dad. David seems to be totally disconnected somehow, that he's not sensing what's going on in his own family. I would know there's certain relationships between my boys, even to this day, that I know about them. And I'm aware. And if I'm not, bad things happened, you know, when they were little, because I didn't see certain dynamics going on. That was part of my role as a father and as a parent, to be aware of what's the dynamic going on between my children. So that I could take act. Whoa, I know where this is going. Go over there.
Yeah, I wonder if when Amnon was maybe smaller, playing around with Jonadab. I'm wondering if anybody ever told him, hey, that Jonadab,
He's a bad kid.
he's a bad influence on you, you know, you better watch it with him. Because he's like a kind of friend that just gives you bad advice, or always doing something,
You know,
trouble following.
that's the problem with royal family, especially a crown prince. He's going to be the king, dude. You better like him. He may be rotten, but you better like him, because when he's in charge, and you can go through the kings of England, France, and look at their children that were coming up. Some of them were crazy as loons, and they knew, the people around them knew those crown princes were nuts, and they couldn't do anything about it, because that's the bloodline. And so the servants and everybody around them would tolerate this stuff, which I think is appalling. And I don't know, as a dad, sometimes, you know there's certain things maybe broke about your children, but it doesn't excuse overlooking it. And I think that possibly, in that conversation with Amnon, when he's asking about his sister coming to bake cakes at my house, and I hand it to so I can watch her. That's the first sign. I want to watch her.
Yeah.
Right? And David's like, okay. I don't know. I've beaten up on him, I think, because this story is so appalling, what happens to Tamar. She never comes out of this in a good way. Nothing about this story. She is desolate from here out. And that's what's so hard. She never gets her on her back. She's never restored. and she's minimized. And David never tries to restore her honor. That's the most appalling that I see. She states morally, don't violate me. Morally, it's just wrong. You know? One, you're my brother. And then the next thing, the covenant. There's a covenant thing here in Israel, the Mosaic law, that not such a thing should be done in Israel. This is not, now maybe in the Gentile world, and see, this is another thing. Remember I told you about how you have Amnon, who is more Hebrewic, his mother. Tamar and Absalom have more of the Gentile culture, possibly, because of their mother. Their mother was raised as a Gentile. Their marriage, Absalom and Tamar's mother, was basically a political marriage in order to gain power with an external kingdom. So David married their mother out of political clout that he could gain. So how were they raised? How was the mom raised? She wasn't raised with the culture of the Mosaic law and covenantal type of law. What I'm getting at is Tamar has more clarity about it and loyalty toward the covenant than this boy who's a crown prince, who his mother was also Hebrew and should have been teaching him. You see the conflict? It's almost like sometimes we see that where Jesus said, how many times? He'd say, I haven't seen such faith even in Israel. Right? And it kind of, when she is saying this, not that she's some dirty Gentile, but her background and everything in heritage, yet she seems to be more spiritual about this, that it's a thing. And then she warns him, and this is where we come to what you were saying as well, Lorenzo, about the shame. This is not only shameful, but then also the fact that, says, okay, we'll read it. She answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. In other words, covenant, right? Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where should I carry my shame? And as for you, so there's both. She's saying there's consequences for both of us. As for, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. And how can I carry my shame? Now let's talk about her. One of the things we'll learn later is that whenever she is kicked out of his house, kind of spoiler alert if you're not aware of the story, she ends up being basically kicked out and rejected by him, but it describes her robe. That robe that she is wearing is the same description that Joseph wore. It's one of distinguishedness, one of honor, one of purity, one that she would be proudly wear. It also identified her as royalty. And if she is royalty, so whenever she would go anywhere, people would see her beauty, obviously her beauty, but it gave everyone the awareness of her purity. And there was a different dress style for the virgins, the pure princesses, versus the married ones. So everything about her appearance that she would dress would reflect her social status as being the king's daughter. She was royalty, king's daughter, I guess, same thing. But it should give her royal protection. The irony is it can't protect her from her own royalty. And that's where we see. So how can I carry this shame? I mean, one of the things as well that a princess was expected to do, whether you like it or not, was to marry and be useful in the royal family by marrying other wealthy or higher class society to bring power together, unite them. And so a lot of times marriages were arranged in such that, you would marry this house to that house. King of Thrones, just in case you're Game of Thrones, in case you want to kind of get a grasp on that, even though it's so fictitious. But it was going to make her basically worthless. defiled. To where, how could she ever marry somebody that would be of such a social status equal to what she should have been able to marry? She couldn't. Economically, now whoever she marries, everything. And so where can I carry that guilt? Because that guilt is going to go with me in every aspect of my life, and it's never going to leave me. Not that she's a part, maybe she is reflecting that if we go through with this, you see, if we go through with this, I've got this shame, I got this guilt, because she's not guilty, okay? She is not guilty at all. But it's the impact on me. Now on you, what is this going to do to you when it comes out? As one of the outrageous fools in Israel. So what does that mean? One of the outrageous fools in Israel. There were some historically. Nabal, remember Abigail? In 1 Samuel chapter 25, we read about Abigail. David's men, they were out on they were basically living off the land, running from Saul. David sends his men to Nabal because Nabal was an extremely wealthy man. And they depended upon the kindness of people giving him food and such. And so it was that time of the year where they were harvesting and such that he could send his messengers to go and ask for some donations to support him. And Nabal totally disrespects them. And they go back and they tell David, and David mounts up the army and he heads towards Nabal and he's ready to kill him, right? And it's Abigail who comes out and says, "My Lord," she prostrates herself and she pacifies him. Do you remember how he died? Because that's going to come back later. But she tells David, basically, he is what he is. He's a fool. And we find later on, the manner in which he dies is going to be eerily similar to what is going to happen to Amnon. Because she says, you're going to be like one of the great fools. And Nabal was one of those. And the Lord struck him, right? So she is bringing it out. But the key word again, he would not listen. That's not love. Love listens. In spite of what you may want and demand, you respect. You respect that other person. And love will yield. Love will honor. Love will not defile. It's just, so right away we find out those words, not listen, to me, says this is not love. This is all about lust and about satisfying himself. And then 15 through 22, we see his response. Once he finally violates and violates her, he kind of captures her and keeps her basically in his house. Okay, you're going to take care of her. And so there seems to be, now we don't know how long all this happens, but it seems to be fairly quick that all of a sudden now she's appalling to him. Why? I thought she was amazing. Oh, I just want to look upon her so she can bake those cakes for me. And now what? Every time he sees her, he's sickened by it. What changed with her? Nothing. It's him. Because every time he saw her, it reminded him. Were you going to say something? So when you think about this, and by the way, I mean, we look at this story and it's very in our face because it's written historically. But the dynamics that we see today in families of multiple siblings from different mothers over multiple marriages, I've known some, that There's been some horrible things that go on between stepsister and brothers. It just like, and a lot of it goes back again to, I mean, and even for David, polygamy was not something God endorsed. This is not the marriage model. And when we look at this story, this is a result of not following God's marriage model. What God had established is what was right, what was pleasing for each other, to be dedicated to one person, one man, one woman. And this is a resultant as well as this that's going on. Remember, the sword is not going to depart, okay? That's a part of this. And I always wondered, how did this come about? Did God turn Amnon? Did he make Amnon who he was so he could torture David with consequences? Well, God's not like that, so no. But I find it interesting that through his relationships and the things that God had not directed, but then it's interesting how God seems to bring him into the picture. Because now he become a tool, right, of the rape of his own daughter. And we're going to see where David's not going to get out of this, So he throws her out, and she publicly mourns. So she didn't have to go and get on Twitter or X or Instagram or TikTok. All she had to do is change her appearance. And people are going to know. She went from reflecting the glory of a princess to one who had been totally destroyed. Something was wrong. Huh?
I said, did it say in verse 20, her brother said to her, has David, your brother, been with you?
Yeah, Absalom does.
Yeah, because Absalom, you could tell when she came back, she could have said that she changed her robe.
See, and this is where it's kind of like, well, how did Absalom all of a sudden know so quickly? And why would he assume that it's Amnon? There has to be a little more that, maybe he knew that she went and was over there caring for him. You see? And then she comes back and she's in this disheveled, disgraced disposition. And so Absalom's like, okay, you were just over at our brother's house, and now what's going on? So I think you're right. Somehow he was able to discern real rapidly that.
Well, it says, brother, not to cut you off.
Well, he asked the question.
But it says that she put ashes on her head and tore her robe of many colors that was on her. So she must have stripped herself of certain colors,
Right.
because she had been violated, so she was no longer a virgin.
Well, it's also the royal, like I said,
The royal robe.
but how would Absalom been able to say that it was because she's been assaulted by her brother, or did somebody die? Are you mourning? What happened? You see? She could have done that because, whenever they would weep over somebody's death or something, they'd tear their garments, right? And put ashes on because something devastating occurred. He nails it. She doesn't tell him, but he nails it. Absalom gets it. He's like, wait a minute. You were over there at Amnon, our brother's house. And now you come back and look. The only thing he could think of in the short time span or whatever it was, something happened when you were at his house. And that, I think he believed. It also may infer that everybody knew he had the hots for her, that he was lusting after her. And then for her to show back up, Absalom's looking and going, something. So yes. So now, again, here's a hidden sin that Amnon is trying to cover up by first secluding her and then getting rid of her and thinking almost, well, she's out of sight, out of mind, not worrying about her. Now look at the difference between what David and father did with Bathsheba. Same thing. David saw Bathsheba, lusted after her, he took her, right? Amnon looked at his sister, lusted after her, took her. David tried to cover it up. But there's also a difference here. Remember we talked about this, that David as king, he did not reject her Bathsheba the way that Amnon is treating Tamar. Tamar, he's humiliating and bouncing out. David went to umpth length to cover it up and keep her honor, and that covering up made more and more sin, but he never betrayed Bathsheba, did he? Like I said, he could have just said, I don't know who she's sleeping with. I'm the king, man. Everybody's going to accuse me. Everybody's going to try to blame. Yeah, she came over, but come on, man. He could have easily just said, let Bathsheba deal with it. And that's what he's doing. Ammon's he's like ramping it up. There's a part where father like son, but Ammon's like just totally disregarding her. David at least took care of Bathsheba. And here, Tamar's not. Bathsheba at least becomes the king's wife. So, and that's one of the things that you can see. Love would have protected her, but here we see lust is what doesn't. The other thing that's brought up is verse 21. David finds out about it. Heard of all these things, and he was angry. That's it. That's all we got. Now, if you were a peasant and you worked in the fields, that's about all you could probably do, right? But you're the king, and it's your daughter, and your son did this. Oh, well, he is the crown prince. Now, if it would have been one of the other brothers, I don't know. I'm just assuming that, is he overlooking him because he's so fixated that David's almost saying, well, he's going to be the king someday, and I made a mistake. Now, see how he could almost look and say, maybe David was wise enough as well to go, well, I did a Bathsheba thing, ooh. And my sin cost the death of a child. So is this not as bad? Is he justifying it somehow? And why he won't take action? Because of his own guilt of his sin? Again, I'm presuming, but it absolutely is a realistic thought that maybe he as well is holding back because of his sin. Now, this is a good point. As a parent, we do a lot of stupid things when we're growing up in school, right? And we've done a lot of stuff that's shameful. And then when our children come up, we don't want them to do it, right? And now there's a difference, because there are some parents that will say, well, I was drinking when I was his age. Ha, ha, ha. How can I stop him from doing that? Is that what we have here? How can I judge my boy when I did the same thing? And it gets worse, doesn't it? The same situation. Well, I was drinking when I was in high school, and I drink and drive, and it didn't kill me, and so how can I be so hard on my kids now? And they go out and drink and drive, and they get killed. Right? I don't think I'm too far off on this one. I think this is possibly a reality of why David doesn't take action. Anger without the action, it fails Tamar. She becomes more and more victimized. Think about it. She was already a victim by being assaulted the way she was. And then she's going to be victimized and a scourge of society. She will never be able to be looked at with honor. Because, come on. We see it today in our society a lot of times, and it was that way for a long time, where, the prosecutors say, well, you shouldn't have dressed that way, you wouldn't have got raped. Right? Shouldn't have been in that location. You shouldn't have been out late that night, and you wouldn't have got assaulted. What? Victim blaming? Right? So you don't think that wasn't going on? Well, why'd you go to his house and dress that way? Why did you sit there and cook food? She just, I feel horrible for this, and the fact that she just continues to be the victim. And now Absalom, he takes care of her. He does the right thing, doesn't he? The brotherly thing. But we see this idea of conflict and the sword, it shifts from one brother to another, doesn't it? Now, it wasn't a literal sword with Tamar, but the violence, okay? So from Amnon, one brother, now it's going to jump houses, because now it's going to go to Absalom. Because Absalom can you imagine how he felt about his dad not doing nothing to protect his sister? Again, siblings of the same mother are far closer, right, than the siblings of another mother. And so I feel Absalom's anger. And especially when dad's not doing anything about it.
I think back in that day, men, the women weren't looked upon as having a lot of value anyway, because she was David's daughter. But the men, I think, could get away with more without any kind of
Yeah, no repercussions.
Yeah, just like back in Jesus, when they brought the lady to Jesus, that she just did adultery, they didn't even bring the man.
Yeah, they didn't bring the man when they brought. Yeah,
So I think
same thing.
yeah,
Yep, you're absolutely right.
just kind of looked over what men do.
That's why I respect Absalom to this point, anyway, in the story. There's a part you can't deny it. But the thing is, and it's interesting, for 2 years, he waits, doesn't he?
Yeah.
This is why we know Absalom is a pretty powerful young man, because he has his own wealth, he has his own residence. I mean, because when we come to this, we see as his plan is going to be revealed that he's a pretty wealthy dude. He's got his own. And we know he's good looking too, brother and sister, because later on we hear about his hair and his stature and stuff, So if you jump to the end of his life and you find out his manipulative power and charisma, you can imagine he still has it, even in this point in this story, as we go through this. Absalom is charismatic. He would be the king you'd look at and go, yeah, he looks like the guy. He's got this power about him. But he sits silent for 2 years. Think about this. Every time he saw that brother. And what's interesting is he never rebuked him. He doesn't get into fights with him. What? He's silent with him. He's respectful. I've always said, when somebody won't talk to you, they don't express themselves, and come on. Amnon had to know that Absalom knew. She's living in his house because she's destitute now. And then every time you'd run across Absalom, if I was Amnon and he's being really nice to me, I'd be going, where's the knife, brother? Right? Wouldn't you? I would be so afraid of Absalom, I would stay away from him.
He also tells his sister, too, to hold her peace.
Said what?
Remember, I said he also tells his sister to hold her peace.
Yes.
He says, hold your peace. He's still our brother. And like you said, for 2 years, he was like...
Absalom's pretty smart about this.
Yeah, he let it just be calm, like you said. He didn't show no violence.
There's no way you could predict what's going to happen. He's covering it up to such a point that all the people around him would think, well, Absalom's he's not bothered by it anymore. So that when he executes his plot, right? And that's what he does. He brings David in on it. Notice this? Amnon brought David daddy on it. Can you get Tamar to come over here? Aha! Sword just jumped from one brother to another and then drags David into both of them. You see his fingerprints all over this story on both his sons? How that David, when he looked back, he had to think, I'm the one that told Tamar to go over there. And now Absalom comes to him and says, hey, we're having a party down here at my place out here. It's sheep shearing time. It's, we're done. Hard work's over. It's kind of like the end of the harvest. And boys are all getting together. Let me bring all my brothers down there. And you come, Dad. And Dave's like, no, we don't want to be too much of a burden. And Absalom persuades him. He goes, no, well, at least let Amnon come with me. Now, wait a minute, David, why didn't you go, whoa? If he would have never said Amnon, and just kept saying generically, let me have all the brothers with me, all the brothers, would include Amnon, right? But if David was awake and listening, he should have remembered the story that his sister was raped by Amnon. So why now do you say, okay, well, if they all can't come, at least let Amnon come with me? That's when the flare should have went off, alarm should have been going, said, oh no, no. You raped your sister. Come on, man. We know this. This is out in the open. And he lets him do it. He facilitates it, doesn't he?
It just came to my mind some the wine, drinking. When David did what he did to Bathsheba's husband by trying to get him drunk. And then now you got the son, like he said, oh, we have a party, we drink. Come on, mom. It's like the same.
It is.
It's the same.
And that's what's interesting is that it's not only the sword wasn't going to leave David's house, but David's fingerprints were going to be on those swords. It wasn't going to be like all of a sudden he hears a story that Tamar went over to Ammon's house and was raped. No, you're a part of the story. And now he's going to be a part of the death of Amnon, right? So he gave a great plan. And he tells his servants what? Okay, watch for the signal. When Amnon is a certain drunk, I'm going to give the signal, and then you guys pounce on him. And he even tells the servants, man up. He doesn't say that. Be strong and courageous. I thought that was kind of interesting too, that Samuel is writing the same language that the Lord told Joshua, right? Did you pick up on that? Yes. Be strong, be courageous. It's okay. And now this is where Jonadab comes back, right? So he kills him, and the boy, I love this. I love this. This when he says after they're dead, what do the brothers do? They load up on their donkey and they get out of town. I just see all of them scurrying out the door. Where to park my donkey, and getting on the donkeys and heading out. I don't know how fast things travel. I know they didn't have electronic devices, but somehow David found out that there was something happening, and he's assuming, this is interesting, that Absalom killed them all. Why would he jump to that conclusion? I don't know. But I don't know. But it's good old Jonadab, right? And again, it mentions him by name, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. See how this family, everywhere you keep going through this, brother, sister, brother, you know. No, it's okay. They didn't kill all the young men, the king's sons. Just Amnon alone is dead. How would he know that? He's not there. The brothers are running back now. I mean, they're just, I don't know, maybe I'm assuming too much. But I don't like this guy anyway. There's something just shifty about him. That he's in the right place, but it's interesting, all of his advice never lays consequences that he's going to have to deal with himself. It's one of those people that are always on the outside of the situation, but they always seem to be there and egging it on or giving advice, and you know, they have no skin in the game, in other words. But this revenge did not bring justice, did it? That false report just spread the fear. Jonadab knew the plan. Remember? This is interesting. Now, wait a minute. If he's Ammon's friend, why did he let Amnon go down there? I mean, if he's such a crafty feller and wise, and Amnon goes, hey, man, I'm going down to Absalom's place. We're going to have a little party down there. I think if I was Jonadab, I'd say, don't do it. Remember, you raped his sister. I think he knew the plan. And again, that's what I mean about it. He hangs on the outside of the family. He's got no skin in the game. And there's a part, maybe you feel like, he deserves it. But you came up with a plan to get her raped. I call that accessory to rape, right? That's why I don't like this guy. This guy's So you going to say?
I was going to say, I had a point that I was going to make.
Oh, I need to stop sooner then because I overrun you and then I come back and then I'm sorry, I throw you out of your...
Yeah, I know what I was going to say. Okay. Yeah, Absalom had to, at those 2 years when he was waiting, probably trying to think of a plan, he had to play it really cool because I'm sure he saw Amnon, times, and he had to say like, hey, I'm moving with you, brothers, moving, and try to see other people, because other people would have probably told Amnon that, hey, your brother Absalom is furious at you, but Absalom probably just played it until he had his opportunity to, I don't think they suspected it.
Yeah, you... Yeah, I think he knew.
He was probably waiting. He was probably more or less the one that was waiting for something to happen because he was more, like you said, who initiated the whole thing.
Yeah.
And for Absalom to be so cool and strong, he's probably like, he's going to do something. And then when that came up, like you said, why can't he just stop? And it's going down there.
So you think Jonadab is clearing his conscience by getting justice for what Amnon did? Maybe Jonadab wasn't as crafty or wise. Maybe he thought all things were going to be wonderful. Well, let's go back to the sister-brother thing. Because you talked about now, because this is a point of discussion with scholars and stuff about Tamar's statement and saying, well, let's just go to the king. And then we can make this right. He will not deny you. Remember that? He will let this happen. Well, unless he changed Mosaic law, the king couldn't do it because it was illegal. Now, there is a little bit of a loophole. Can you think about what it would be?
Because they're not married, because of the step.
There's step.
The step, they're not being actually the same mom, yeah.
Oh, I could see the Pharisees easily being able to split that hair and go, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because technically, they're not brother and sister.
Yeah, that's
So-
Abraham, but they weren't saying,
Their step. Sarah and Abraham, yeah. But that was pre-Mosaic, but at the same time. But it is still a little bit of a loophole that he could have worked in there. But it wasn't that Tamar, I want to defend Tamar. I've really been defending her a lot. And I think it needs to be. It wasn't that she was trying to say, I want this to happen. I think she's trying to get out of the room. And I think she's also wants to get it before the king. You see? Fool him in thinking that the king's going to be good with this. And he wouldn't. See what I mean?
she was just thinking fast, trying to
Thinking fast and saying, you know what, let's get out of this. If I can get out of this moment of this passionate and he's got me, locked me down or whatever, I can stop this. And then when it does get to the king, David, he'll put a halt to it. He won't. And so what? She lied. That he was going to, she told him, oh, he won't deny you. So what? She survived, right? She survived. So anyway, we'll kind of get through this. I know we had some technical problems and we're running a little late, but yeah. So he runs to who? Guess where he goes? He goes to seek refuge with his Gentile relatives. And David does nothing. Does nothing. And the family remains broken. There's no reconciliation. David doesn't try to, come on. David's power and influence with this other king, he's more powerful than any king around him. He subjugated everyone around him. You're telling me he couldn't get that father-in-law? Wouldn't he be a father-in-law, the king? Hey, I need my boy back home. We got to fix this. But he just went silent. He ghosted everything, the whole situation, doesn't he? And so this connection is very similar, right? David took what's not his. Amnon took Tamar by force. David arranged the death. Absalom arranged the death. By the way, that whole situation, coming back full circle to Nabal, the night before Nabal died, when Abigail comes back after saving his life from not being destroyed by David's forces, Nabal's having a party. He's drinking, he's drunk, and they're celebrating when? At the end of a harvest. And she doesn't talk to him because it's like, he's drunk. But in the morning, she tells him, this is what happened. And he is so angry, and then all of a sudden, he has a stroke or something, but it says he basically becomes like stone. And it's interesting that the party environment of the greatest fool of Israel, remember, she told him, you don't want to become one of the greatest fools of Israel. And how did his death go down? Almost exactly the way Nabal, who is labeled as one of the greatest fools. Kind of interesting. So desire is not love. And truth must be listened to. David didn't listen. Nobody was listening, And the other thing is the victim shaming, the victim blaming. Somehow this was her fault. And I think the biggest failure of this continual violence that's going to remain in this house is a failure of leadership, of taking action. You can't overlook it. And this, as far as Absalom, we're not over with him. Story's just beginning with him, right? And so we're going to see how his revenge is going to end up multiplying his sins and what he does. And it's just going to get worse from there. All right, well, that's kind of abbreviated 12, jumping into 13. So next week, read 14. It's going to get even darker. So before we leave, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Our most gracious Father, we're so thankful for all that you do for us, and especially these sordid stories, even though they're disgusting and despicable. You're not ashamed to show us so that we can learn more about ourselves. We can learn that you are honest with us and that you're truthful and that you want us to be able to not repeat the mistakes that we're learning. We pray, Father, that we would guard ourselves and our relationship with you with all our heart, and that we would strive to always be honest and forthright with our sins and turn to you and ask for forgiveness. We pray that you be with us as we depart from here, that we would be safe, and that we'd be blessed to be back again the next appointed time. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. All right. 9:45 Bible study, 10:45 for worship, 4 p.m. This is all on next Sunday. And of course, next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Until then, God bless.